Okay, so this is the first lecture of week 3 in Greek 1, and tonight we're going to talk about, we're in chapters 9 and 10 is what we're going to do tonight in Bill Mounce's textbook. So we're going to talk about adjectives, a few odds and ends, and then we're going to learn some stuff about the third declension, but we're going to get started. So adjectives in Greek are the same as adjectives in English. They modify a noun or a pronoun. And in Greek, you're going to find that adjectives perform one of three functions. So there are three functions that we have with an adjective. The first function is what we call attributive. The adjective is attributing a quality to the noun. So he studied ancient Hebrew. What type of Hebrew? Ancient Hebrew. So the adjective is attributing something to the Hebrew. So attributive is the first function. The second function is substantive. That's when the adjective functions as if it were a noun. If you know the phrase out with the old and in with the new, old is an adjective, but it's not saying what is old, right? But it's functioning as a noun. Out with the old thing, out with the old idea, out with the old whatever the context says, right? If you're talking about ideas, or you're talking about fashion, if you hold up a shirt that's 30 years old and you say out with the old and in with the new, then you would be talking about an old shirt or an old garment. So substantive is when the adjective functions as if it is the noun. And then the third function of an adjective is when it is a predicate adjective. That's when the to be verb, which is he is, she is, they were, that to be verb is implied. And so it's that predicate adjective that's going to be the thing that you're going to have to make sure that you're paying attention to when you're learning the various paradigms, or when you're translating sentences in Greek. But there are some rules that direct that you learn those rules and you'll be fine. And I just want to tell you, we're going to cover a lot of stuff tonight. I'm going to move fairly quickly because you've already learned what a paradigm is. You've already learned that the inflected meaning can change based on how the word ends, right? You've already done that with those paradigms. Adjectives fall within that same paradigm. And then we're going to have 2 or 3 words that have sort of a special paradigm that you're going to have to learn. So to really get through the adjectives, the only way to get through it is to just learn them. But the good news is, if you can recognize the stem of the adjective, then it's going to help you in sentence translation. So even if you don't remember all the different aspects of the different adjective paradigms, if you recognize the stem when you're translating the sentence, it's going to help you to pick out which noun the adjective modifies. So let's get started. So this should look really familiar. See the endings? Agathos, agathou, agatho, agathon. Agathos is nominative. Agathou is genitive. This is singular. This is the word agathos means good. So this is good, of good, to or for good, and good, right? Because you have nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. But what you find with adjectives is, because an adjective can modify any noun, you find the adjectives in masculine, feminine, and neuter. Does that make sense? It's going to follow the paradigm of your masculine, feminine, or neuter nouns. So if you know that logos is masculine nominative, if you know that logu is masculine genitive, if you know that logo with the subscript is masculine dative, and if you know that logon is masculine accusative, then you should know that agathos, agathu, agatho, and agathon follows that same pattern. So I hope that makes sense. So there's the singular and there's the plural, agathoi, agathon. If you were to turn back in your book when we were learning these paradigms, then you should recognize that. So generally speaking, for most of your adjectives, they're going to follow that same paradigm. So only thing you need to do is really remember the stem. Now, we said that there were three functions of the adjective. This is the first is attributive. That's where the adjective attributes something to the noun. So let's look at this sentence, ho, agathos, logos. So remember, anytime that you have a sentence, you want to try to break it up into its parts. So you see that the definite article is there. You see that agathos is there. You know that agathos means good, and it is masculine nominative, so it means good. And logos is there. You can see because of the ending, it is masculine nominative singular, and it means word. So literally, that sentence just means the good word, right? Because you have the article. But what if you don't have the article? Good word, or you could put a good word. When it comes to, and we're going to get into this a little more, when it comes to translating adjectives into a sentence, you're going to follow one or two rules. They're going to help you know whether to say the good word, or the word is good. There's going to be, but I just need you to trust me here that when you begin translating your sentences, it's not going to be difficult to know how you should do that, because you just need to remember that the sentence that you construct from the Greek words needs to make sense as if you were writing it in English for the first time, right? So that's what you're going to see in the attributive. What is the word? It is good, right? You are attributing goodness to the word, right? Substantive or substantive all, the case will determine the function. If you have your textbook, I want you to go to section 9.9 in the textbook. So when the adjective is performing a substantive function, the case, and remember, case is nominative, genitive, dative, or accusative. The case will determine the function. And then number and gender are going to be determined by what it stands for. So let's look at section 9.9, right? You see in the first sentence there by the first square bullet point, the adjective's case is determined by its function, as is true of any noun. For example, if the adjective is functioning as the subject of a verb, it will be in the nominative case. So you understand what that means? So whatever the case of the adjective is will determine its function in the sentence. So you would not have an accusative adjective that modifies a nominative noun. Does that make sense? So the case of the adjective and the case of the noun are going to match. So that's all that's saying. That's saying that the number and gender are determined by what it stands for. And when the adjective is in is performing the function of a predicate, that's where you have the to be verb you have to start considering. And sometimes the to be verb, which the primary form is a me, it can be expressed or it can be implied. And again, there's going to be a rule that's going to help us figure this out. But you can see in well, let's just go to the next slide. So here you have the man good, right? Now, that sentence doesn't make any sense in English. The man good. It sounds like a caveman would say it, right? The man good. So you know that the word is implied because of a rule. And that rule is if the noun has the article, and we're going to talk about the rules more in depth in just a minute, but you see here that the noun has the article and the adjective does not. That's going to tell you that you should translate that, the man is good. So the correct translation is the man is good. If you were to translate that, the good man, why would it be wrong? Because you're using the article for good and not man. You see what I mean? So the man is good. So moving on from that, now go ahead and take a look at in your book on page 82. I want to show you something. You'll see all the different forms of it on page 82. So if you see kind of the top part of the page there, you see the different versions of agathos sort of in the middle of the page there. This is when this is sort of playing out the substantive. When I said here substantive, this is demonstrating when an adjective functions in the substantive case. So you can see that agathos is masculine singular, a good man. Now there is no indefinite article. A is an indefinite article that we have in English. You don't have an indefinite article in Greek. So you add it for clarity so that it makes sense in English. Agathos by itself, since it is masculine singular, means good man or a good man. Whereas agathai, which is feminine plural, would mean good women. One of the mistakes that almost all of you made on your last quiz was you would parse a word and you would place it in the plural, but then when you translated the word, you would translate it into the singular. In other words, if you were to see the word logoi, which is masculine, which is masculine nominative plural, right? Logoi. What you would do in a lot of cases on your last quiz is you would say, masculine nominative plural word. But logoi is masculine nominative plural words, right? So just make sure that however you parse the word, if you parse it as plural, then the translation needs to be plural or it's wrong. So here you have agathe. That is feminine plural. So it means good women. It wouldn't be a good women, would it? Because that doesn't make any sense in English. It wouldn't be the good women because you don't have a definite article. So, in this case, it would just be good women. So just use your knowledge of how we use the English language to help you make this. And even if it seems a little confusing now, when you start to translate sentences, adjectives are not that hard. Agathon is neuter singular, a good thing. But hoi agathoi, the good ones, because it's neuter, right? Or it's masculine. I'm sorry. The good men or the good ones or the good people. Now here's what we were talking about in section 9.10. We're talking about the predicate function. We have ho, anthropos, agathos. There is no article preceding good, but there's an article preceding the noun. So article, noun, adjective, you're gonna insert that to be verb based on context. That could be he is, he was, she was, they were, they are, right? It's going to be some version of that based on the context of the sentence. I know you don't remember it, but hopefully all this makes sense. Adjectives are not hard. The presence or the lack of a presence of the article helps you to determine how to translate. Don't worry about the definitions on this page. You have other stuff to memorize. You don't need to memorize the definitions. But just know that Arnothris, the article is not present. Articular, the article is present. And so you have the article either present or not present in the three different functions, or that affect the three different functions. And remember, the three different functions are attributive, substantive, and predicate. Attributive, if it modifies a noun. Substantive is there's no noun for the adjective to modify, which means that the noun is implied. And then the predicate. So let's look at how to tell whether an adjective is attributive or substantive. You just ask questions. Is there an article? Yes. Does it modify another word? Yes. It's attributive. No, it's substantive. If there's no article, then it's adverbial, which means it's sort of acting like an adverb. And if you look at, we're pressing forward a little bit, but if you look at 9.14, you'll see this paradigm. But what I really want to point to is section 9.12. Let's go ahead and kind of talk through some of this on page 83, right? So let's talk about the presence of the article. If the article occurs immediately before the adjective, in other words, if it's articular, it means the article is present. So if the article occurs immediately before the adjective, then it's either going to be attributive or substantive. If it's attributive, meaning there's a noun for it to modify, then the adjective can become before or after the noun. Look at the middle of page 83, right below 9.12, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You see two different examples there. You see the definite article, the adjective, and the noun. Ho agathos anthropos means the good man. But you may also see, and I think this is probably what you see most of the time, ho anthropos, ho agathos. Literally, the man, the good. Well, you're going to drop the article before the adjective, and it's just going to be the good man. You're dropping the article because the man, the good is not how you would say it in English. So remember, we're translating from Greek to English. And so your translation needs to make sense in English. So if you see an article and a noun followed by an article and an adjective, you're just going to drop the article for the adjective. You're not going to write out when you write your sentence out, you're not going to write the man, the good. You're going to write the good man. But if there's no noun for the adjective to modify, so if you just see an article, a definite article, and an adjective, you just see ho agathos. Agathos is a masculine nominative singular adjective. It's got a definite article, so you have to translate the definite article. You're just going to say the good man or the good person. So if the noun has the article, but the adjective does not, then that's going to be a predicate adjective. And that's when you're going to have to supply the verb. This is what I was saying earlier. If the noun has the article, but the adjective does not, then that's the sign where you're going to add the to be verb. You can see here we've got two different examples. We've got agathos, ho, anthropos. So you've got the adjective, then you've got the definite article, and you've got the noun. So because you do not have a definite article in front of the adjective, you're inserting that to be verb. So if you were to translate this literally into English, it would be good the man. That does not make sense in English. So for it to make sense in English, you have to add the to be verb. The man is good. You see it written the other way, the man good, which is easier, right? Because that's a little easier to do. But the article tells you how to translate it. Now, these are just rules that you have to memorize. But again, I think you're going to find it a little easier than some of the other things that you've done because you're going to find the article agreeing in case with the noun, and it's just going to make it a little easier. All right, I've already showed you that. Let's see. When we're skipping some of this stuff, we just covered that. Here's what we were just talking about. You've got agathos, anthropos, or anthropos, agathos. That is just a good man, a man is good. See, there's no article, right? There's no article in the noun, and there's no article for the adjective. Now, I'll tell you what I do. If there's no article, this is just what I do to help keep it simple for me. And you have to change it for it to make sense when you're translating. But if I see agathos, anthropos, or anthropos, agathos, and there's no article at all, in almost every case, I would translate that a good man. I would not insert the to be verb because there's no article. In other words, I'm trying to make it easy for myself. I would just always translate a good man. If you have enough to remember, you don't need to remember two different things that mean the same thing. Just focus on one of them, right? If I see that the adjective has an article, then I add is, or add the to be verb. So keep it simple. And this is just the same thing on a different slide. So essentially that is adjectives. You'll go through those, you'll learn the paradigm. But if you're already learning, like you don't have it mastered yet, but you're learning the paradigms for masculine, neuter, and feminine nouns. And generally speaking, you're not learning a new paradigm for most of your adjectives. You're just applying the same paradigm. So you have to learn the meaning of the adjective, and then you're going to see the same case endings, and it's going to be easier to spot. So learning those vocabulary words are going to make it easier for you to spot it. There are some what Dr. Mounce is calling odds and ends, and these are just rules that you have to remember. But again, it's just going to be it's going to be something that makes sense in English. So we use a definite article to mean the in every case. That's what a definite article is for us. It's the word the, right? The man, the dog, right? The definite article in Greek has a bit more nuanced use. So for instance, if you see the article before a proper name, right? Then you don't translate the article. It's letting you know that's a proper name, right? Galilee or Jesus or whatever. But there's also a function of the article in Greek that helps you translate prepositional phrases. So sometimes you will see an article, the definite article, followed by prepositional phrase. Now remember, preposition is related to what I think that the illustration that Mounce uses is what a rabbit can do to its den, in, under, around, through, right? So if you see a prepositional phrase and you see an article before it, then you're going to translate that some version of the phrase who are or who were. Here's the example that we have. Look at this example in the middle of the slide there. Tous, pedos, which means the children. And then you have tous in Bethleu. So we have the children. Then we have the in Bethlehem. If you translate it literally, that's what that sentence translates to in English. The children, the in Bethlehem. Because in Bethlehem is a prepositional phrase, and because that prepositional phrase is preceded by an article, you're going to translate the article some version of either who are or who were, and you're going to translate this sentence, the children who are in Bethlehem. Context is going to tell you whether or not you're going to translate it who are or who were, right? Here's another sentence below that. Elaleson, which is they spoke. That's a verb you haven't learned. They spoke. Ton logon, the word. To curiou. See how you're getting the genitive now? So they spoke the word of the Lord. Hasin, that's to all. You haven't learned that yet. Tois, there's an article. Ente oikia. Ente oikia is a prepositional phrase. In the house. So that prepositional phrase is preceded by an article. So you're going to translate that as some version of who are or who were. They spoke the word of the Lord to all who were in the house. The verb's going to help you too when you learn your verbs. So that's something new that you haven't seen, but you will see that. You definitely will see that later on, especially when you get further along and you start doing your translations. All right. Slide 15. Okay. Here's another odds and ends, and it is an adjective that you're going to be learning this week, and it's aeonios. Aeonios. It means eternal. Say aeonios can be masculine or feminine. So typically when you see that Omicron sigma, right? When a word ends in Omicron sigma, typically you say, okay, that's masculine. Well, aeonios is one of those words that to really understand it, you need to make sure that you're memorizing that it can be masculine or feminine. If it ends with Omicron nu, then it's going to be neuter. But again, this is like one of those one-off rules. We have a bunch of those one-off rules in English. You're going to see that it modifies a noun that has the same case endings, generally speaking. You just need to remember that means eternal. And you're going to see that it's going to help you in translation. But that's just one of those rules that you have to remember. And then the final special rule that you need to remember is that so let's just go to section 9.17. He explains it here. A neuter plural subject. So sometimes in Greek, you will see a singular verb, but then you'll see that the form of the to be, or you'll see the to be verb is going to be singular, but you'll find that the subject is a neuter plural. So the example we have here is we're just going to read the English translation to speed things up. So 1 John 4:1 says, test the spirits and see if they are, which is estin, from God. Right? So estin is actually translated he is, right? It's not they are, it's he is. So test the spirits. So you wouldn't translate it they are. I mean, you wouldn't translate it he is. You would translate it they are because spirits is plural. And again, that's just one of those one-offs that you'll see some, but you'll just have to remember it. So here's what he says about that. Greek normally uses a singular verb when the subject is neuter plural. So spirits, pneumata, is singular plural. I mean, not singular, but it's neuter plural. So pneumata is neuter plural. But estin is singular. But you would translate it plural because the subject is plural. All right. I think that's enough brain dump on adjectives for one night. Let's go through the vocabulary words that you have for this week. We've already talked about some of them. Just so that you have them, you can start on page 86 if you want to follow along. Agathos, it's an adjective, means good. Agathetos means beloved, or agapetos, I'm sorry. Agapetos. You should see another word in there that you've already learned. Agape, right? Right in there. So you could either say agapetos or agapetos, means beloved. Ianos, which we've already learned. I feel like we've missed one. We did miss one. So he didn't put it in the slides. You've got hagios, which means holy. If it's an adjective, means saints if it's a plural noun. So that's not in the, for some reason that's not in the slides. So I'll have to go back and add that. Then you've got aionios, that means eternal. Alelon, one another. Apokrythe, that is he, she, or it answered. Here's a word you'll see a ton of. And that there's so many different ways to define this, and context helps. But doulos means slave or servant. When you see doulos in the New Testament, so slavery in first century Rome is not like slavery in the antebellum South in the United States, where African tribes would capture other African tribes and sell them to Europeans, and then they would transport these slaves across the world to just be slaves to work. Like they're sold into slavery because they were because it's a business. Typically, a slave in the first century is someone that was working off a debt. Like a bond servant is another way you see that translated in scripture. So if I owe $30,000 on a truck and I can't pay it off, the Chevrolet dealership makes me work for them for 7 years with no pay to pay off the truck. That's a bond servant. So you're working off a debt. You sell your debt to someone and then you work for them to pay it off. The other type of slave you typically see is slaves that were captured in battle that became slaves. But so doulos in most places in the New Testament means bond servant. It doesn't mean like slave, like we think of slavery in the South for the Civil War. So even though that's a diphthong, I pronounce this word eon, if and when. Amos, ame, amon, that is my or mine. It's an adjective. Entole, there's a word you see a lot in the New Testament, commandment. Kathos means as or even as. Kakos means bad or evil. Mu or emu means my. Necros, that means dead. If it's an adjective, it can mean dead body or corpse. Think about if you have flesh that's dying on you, you call it necrotic. Necrotic flesh is dead flesh. So necros, that's where we get that word. Pistis, faithful, believing. We're going to be introduced to a word later on, pistuo. That's the saving faith. So pistos means faithful or believing. Paneros means evil or bad. Protos means first. The part of Genesis where after Adam and Eve sin, God says that the serpent is going to bruise man's heel, but then he will crush the serpent's head. We refer to that as the proto-evangelium, or the first gospel, because proto or protos means first. Jesus is the firstborn from the dead. Protos, first. And then tritos means third. That should be easy to remember. Tri. Okay. Moving on to chapter 10. I know this is a lot, but we're going to kind of breeze through chapter 10. A lot of chapter 10, you're going to be on your own a little bit for chapter 10, just because it's new stuff, but what you're doing is not new. It's just going to be new stuff that you have to memorize. And we're talking about the third declension. So we talked about, first, second, and third declension in Greek. And we see that if the stem ends in an alpha or an eta, then there's a first declension word. And it is also typically feminine or neuter. If the stem ends in omicron, it's a second declension, and it's typically masculine, not always. Good example would be logos or logos. The stem of logos is not log, it's loga. And then the sigma is added to make it nominative. So if the stem ends in alpha or eta, it's a first declension word. If it ends in omicron, it is a second declension. None of that impacts meaning. So now we're going to talk about nouns ending in a consonant. And we call that the third declension. Sounds like a movie, the third declension. So when we look at the declension paradigm for the third declension paradigm, it's going to kind of look new, but I want to explain it so that you understand that it's not really that new. There's just some things going on in Greek that we kind of do in English. So let's look at section 10.4. I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to let Bill Mounce explain it. So let's look at the second paragraph. So the stem of the second declension noun, logos, is loga. That's what I just said. The final omicron joins with the nominative singular case ending sigma to form logos. Got that, right? We've been doing that. Even though you're still memorizing it, I think you've got that. In the third declension, and a good example of that is the word flesh, sarx. The actual stem is not a XZ, it's a kappa, sarx. So if you take the word sark and you add the sigma to make it nominative singular, you would have a kappa sigma on the end of it, right? What sound would it make if you had a kappa and a sigma to make it nominative? You'd have sarx, right? What Greek does is it removes that kappa sigma and changes it to an XZ because is what the XZ makes. So all it's doing is it's changing it to match how you're saying it. It's about speaking Greek at this point. It changes it. The stem, sark, unites with a sigma to make it nominative, but instead of it being kappa sigma, you turn it into sigma alpha rho hexi. Let's look at the paradigm. So the stem, if you look right here on the screen, right here where my cursor is, so you have the sigma, the alpha, the rho, and the kappa. That is the stem. So you want to make it nominative singular. So you would add the sigma. But in Greek, if you have the sound KS, that is an XZ. So this becomes this. So your nominative singular is sarx. I think this is the bigger challenge to remember. That the genitive then, and this is just a rule in Greek that you have to memorize, sarkos is not nominative singular, it's genitive singular. So if you see the word logos in a sentence, you know that means word because it is masculine, nominative singular, word from word. Because you have learned to recognize that OS. Even though you know it's just the S, you've learned to recognize the OS probably. Not OS, but Omicron Sigma, right? But when it comes to the word sarx, it's a little bit of a different declension. Sarkos is the genitive. So there's no way around it. You just have to memorize this paradigm. And the only way to memorize it is to write it over and over and over. Here's the good news. I'm giving you some time to learn this. You may see sarx on a test, but you're not going to have to write out this paradigm on a test. Not yet. I'm going to give you some time to learn it. Okay. But you do need to learn this. This is the singular, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. And then here's the plural. Nominative, genitive, dative, and plural. And you have 3 stems that you're going to have to memorize that are like sark. The stem is sark. So here is the singular declension or the singular paradigm. Anamat, which you'll see, anama is what you'll see. And here is the singular paradigm. And then 10, and we have a rule with 10 where you actually drop the new. But here's the singular paradigm for 10. We're going to go through those in just a minute. And here's the plural. These are all in your book. If you go ahead and turn in your book to page 98, you can see these forms that we're talking about. You see the nominative singular of sark, genitive, dative, accusative, then below it, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, plural. You just have to memorize those. So sark or sarx means flesh. Anima means name. And then tin or tis, the variations of tis means who, what, which, or why, depending on context. Context will help you, and we'll get into that in a minute. And then the only other really new word you have to learn, I just want to make sure there's a couple new words you need to learn. So you learned ace, meaning into, right? So look at how this word is formulated. It has a rough breathing mark. So this is not ace, it's haste, right? So it's a different word. So it means one. All of these mean one. Here's the masculine, haste, henos, henny, henna. Those are all masculine that mean one. Mia, mios, mia with the subscript, and mion. That is feminine, one. And then hen, see, not in. In means in, right? It's a prepositional phrase. There's a preposition. But see that rough breathing mark? Hen. Hen, henos, henny, and hen is neuter for one. All right. So okay. So between section 10.12, you get to all these different rules that that Dr. Mounce goes over, the square of stops and a lot of this other stuff. This is all related to pronunciation and not translation as much. If there is a rule that applies here to translation, we'll cover it when it's time, but it's just stuff you don't need to memorize. The only thing maybe you need to know is that this is the final rule for nouns, is that a towel, just you don't see Greek words that end in a towel. The towel will often drop off. So onomat, that's the word, but you won't see onomat. It drops off, onoma, onomatos. Right, and the only other new word or new adjective for this section is pos. In the singular, pos means each or every, and the plural means all. And here is the singular paradigm for pos. This is all on page 104, and you'll refer back to it when you do your exercises, but it just means each or every in singular and all in plural. So you're going to notice as you look through Dr. Mounce's his chapters, you see where he's got 313 up here. Do you know what that's referring to? That's referring to declension, meaning that this column is third declension, this is first, and this is third. If you need a good review, you can go back to page 37 in the textbook, and there's a really good review of declension. At this point, I think it's something else you have to memorize. So if you can get away with not memorizing it, just move on with your life. Because declension matters for learning the language. But when you've only got 8 weeks to learn most of the language, you've got to start dropping some things that aren't essential. You got to start throwing weight off the plane so you can fly. And just to me, this is a little bit of weight on the plane that you got to get rid of. You need to know it, but really unlikely that your teacher is going to have this on a test. I'd rather you learn vocabulary words and how to translate sentences. I've skipped over a lot, but the primary theme that you need to know from this chapter, from chapter 10, is the paradigm for sark, onomat, and ten, paradigm for ace, mia, and n, which means one, and the paradigm for pos. So all of this for really those four paradigms. The only other thing for us to cover, and I don't know why he's doing this, but this information on the article, this is all the stuff we talked about when we, in the last chapter where we talked about how to translate a prepositional phrase that is preceded by an article. Remember that from the last chapter? If you need a good review of that, section 10.25 and 10.26 is the review. And that is chapter 10. The bulk of the work for chapter 10, you're going to work it out in the workbook. You're going to play around with it. You're going to have your textbook out. You're going to have your workbook out, and you're going to do the work by flipping pages and just working through it with a workbook. But I think that you understand paradigms well enough that I don't have to spend a ton of time on each individual paradigm. Not unless there's something special about the paradigm, like onomat, the towel drops, so it's onoma. All right, so I found hagios. This was a vocabulary word in the previous chapter. So hagios means holy. Hagios pneuma, be a Holy Spirit. Wouldn't be hagios, it'd be hagia. Hagia pneuma means Holy Spirit. Hagia means hagios, hagia, hagion means holy. A means if. A may means except. If not, now when you're translating your sentences, if you see a space there, right, that's not a me, that's not I am, right? That's two different words. A may, except for if not. There's your rough breathing mark in your circumflex, haste, mia, and hen. That means one. A day means now. Kind of looks like, you know, the eta looks kind of like an N, and it's three letters. So if it helps you, 8A means now. That's how I always remembered it. Anama means name. So this is the variations of udes, udemia, uden. This is no one, none, nothing. Here's pas, pasa, and pan. Singular, it means each or every. Plural, it means all. Peri means around. Think about perimeter. That's where we get the word perimeter from. It means around. And here's sarx and sarkos. That's flesh. Soon, with. Soma means body. Teknon means child. Tis is going to be who, what, which, or why. One of the rules that applies to tis is that if it means why, it'll be in the neuter, but you'll see, context will tell you. Now look at the difference here. See the accent mark? Tis, ti. That means who, what, which, or why. Look at the accent mark. Now look at the next word. No accent mark. It means someone or thing, a certain one or thing, or anyone or thing. And you may be thinking to yourself, why would they do that in Greek? That doesn't make any sense. To which I would say in English, you know, there's just no there there. And you understood what I meant because you speak English. So you've just got some of these forms that show up in Greek. And that is the first lecture for the week beginning week 3. We'll stop recording. All right, that's a lot. It feels like a lot of new stuff. But really what it is it's a few new words with a paradigm you have to just remember, right? And some vocabulary words that you just need to make sure that you look for breathing marks and you look for accent marks. So there's a few of those words that you have to remember. There's an accent mark or there's a breathing mark, right? But when you translate